The thing in the forest didn't kill us right away. Like a cat with a mouse, it enjoyed the torment more than the kill. It crept in slowly, hollowing us out from the inside, whispering to us, watching us turn on each other. We came here for riches, a group of tough miners who thought the wilderness couldn't break us. But the truth is, we didn't belong here. They warned us not to dig too deep, not to take too much. We should have listened. When we first arrived at the camp, our spirits were high, and we laughed and chatted as we walked through the golden leaves that had recently fallen. It was early autumn, and though the mornings were brisk, the afternoons brought a crisp golden warmth that made the endless rows of trees stunningly beautiful. We were a 20-man strong mining group, hired in to dig the frozen earth and unearth the veins of silver rumored to be buried there. The camp was rough, a cluster of wooden cabins hastily built against the encroaching cold. We worked hard by day, the only sounds were the slam of metal against earth, but the nights were filled with friendly banter. Joe, a stout burly man with a beard like a grizzly's, always had the best stories or jokes to keep us entertained. And Carter, wiry and quick-witted, would chime in with a snarky remark that sent us into fits of belly laughter. Even the foreman, a hard-nosed bastard called Briggs, seemed to relax in those first few weeks. Takoda, the Indigenous guide who lived on the edge of the camp, was the only one who seemed uneasy. He didn't say much, but when he did, it was always the same warning. Respect the forest. Take only what you need. Yes, yes, we all muttered. That's the plan. But then we struck a huge vein of silver, and our intentions changed. In mid-November, the first snowstorm hit, making our work far more difficult as the ground froze harder and our numb fingers struggled to hold our battered tools. The isolation also began to slowly creep in. Supply runs became infrequent, and the silver deposits the earth had tantalizingly promised were harder to find than expected. The forest, once a backdrop to our work, started to feel like it was closing in on us. The dark, dense trees so thickly close that hardly any light could penetrate through them. Joe joked about it one night, slapping Carter on the back. You scared of a few trees, Carter? Maybe the big bad wolves will get you. Carter grinned, but said nothing. I noticed he had started carrying his rifle, even when he didn't need to. Nerves began to fray as our imaginations began to play with us. The first real sign that something was wrong came a week later, when Joe didn't return after his shift. He'd been out checking the equipment by the southern edge of the camp, a routine job he'd done dozens of times before. When the sun set and Joe hadn't returned, Briggs sent a few of us to look for him. We found his tracks leading into the forest, but then they stopped suddenly, as if he'd simply vanished. There was no blood, no sign of a struggle, just the eerie, empty quiet of the trees. We came back none the wiser, and that night, the camp was unusually quiet. No jokes, no laughter, just the distant sound of the wind through the trees, and something else, faint and far off, a guttural howl. Takoda, our guide, heard it too. I'll never forget the way his face paled as he muttered a single word under his breath. Wendigo. The next dark morning, Briggs dismissed the guide's warning and we set off to look for him again. Joe probably got turned around in the dark, he said. We'll find him as the sun breaks. But we didn't. When we returned, we noticed Carter was also missing and found his rifle lying in the snow outside his cabin. This time, there were signs of a struggle. Long claw marks raked across the cabin wall and blood frozen in the snow. The guide gathered us that night by the fire. You've taken too much from this land, he said, his voice trembling. The Wendigo has come. It feeds on greed, on those who consume more than they need. Most of the men scoffed, even though they looked uneasy, but I couldn't shake the grip of fear in my gut. That night, I woke to the sound of footsteps outside my cabin. At first, I thought it was Joe, but when I peered out of the window, I saw something else. It stood just beyond the edge of the forest line, tall and skeletal, with limbs that seemed to stretch unnaturally long. Its eyes glowed faintly in the darkness, and its head tilted as if it could see me watching. I slammed closed the shutters and pressed my back against the wall, heart pounding. It wasn't human, but what was it? The next day, Briggs was gone. His cabin was empty, the door torn from its hinges. The men were terrified, muttering about wolves or bears, but I knew better. So did the guide. "We have to leave," he said. "Now." Briggs was the only one who could authorize us to abandon the operation, and without him, the men hesitated. The silver was still out there, and despite everything, the lure of wealth was too strong for some of them to walk away. That night, the howls came again, louder this time, closer. Takoda stayed with me, and we made a plan. He told me that the Wendigo couldn't be killed, not by bullets, not by knives, but it could be trapped, bound within a circle of ash and fire. It wasn't much, but it was our only option. We spent the next day gathering wood and marking the ground with ash from the campfire. The others watched but didn't help, their faces sullen and fearful. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the deathly quiet of the forest was gradually replaced by a low guttural growl that seemed to come from everywhere at once. And then it stepped into the clearing. The Wendigo was even more grotesque up close. Its skin was stretched tight over its bones, and its eyes burned with a malevolent light. But what froze me in place was its face. It had Joe's face. But now his features were twisted and his mouth stretched unnaturally wide to reveal rows of jagged, broken teeth. I stumbled back as Takoda shouted for me to light the fire. My hand shook as I struck the match, the flame catching on the woodpile we'd prepared. The fire roared to life, and the Wendigo screamed, a sound that tore through the night like 1,000 voices crying out in agony. It lunged at us, but stopped just short of the circle of ash. Takoda began chanting, his voice steady even as the creature thrashed against the invisible barrier. For a moment, I thought we'd won. But then, the whispers started. They were faint at first, just a soft murmur at the edge of my mind. But as the guide's chanting grew louder, so did the voices. They called my name, begging, pleading, accusing. "You brought this," they said. "You took too much." I fell to my knees, clutching my head as the whispers grew deafening. Takoda tried to pull me back, but the Wendigo lunged again, and this time, the barrier gave way. The last thing I remember is Takoda shoving me towards the forest, his voice breaking as he screamed, "Run!" I don't know how long I ran. The trees blurred together, the cold biting at my skin. When I finally stopped, the camp was gone, and so was Takoda. I collapsed in the snow. A passing truck found me the next morning, half frozen and delirious. They said I was lucky to be alive, but I didn't feel lucky. It's been many, many months, but sometimes at night, I hear the howls again. They're faint, but they're there, echoing in the back of my mind. And when I look in the mirror, I often catch a glimpse of someone or something else. For now, I can control it, but something deep inside me knows I'm not strong enough to fight it forever. To survive that night, I had to leave something behind in that forest. The question is, how long before it comes to collect the rest? Thank you so much for watching our latest video. And please don't forget to like, subscribe, and press the notification bell to keep up to date with newly released stories. And please feel free to comment about what you liked or didn't like and what subjects and themes you'd like explored in future releases. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks again.